Welcome to Best Practice, a show where we interview leaders in the building industry to unpack the tools, strategies, and tactics they use to run great organizations. Today, we're excited to be joined by Marlon Blackwell and Ati Blackwell of Marlon Blackwell Architects for a fireside chat about how to craft a culture of quality and purpose. Marlon Blackwell is a practicing architect in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and serves as the E. Fay Jones Distinguished Professor at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Marlon is integrally involved in every phase of the design process, from programming through construction administration for every project Marlon Blackwell Architects pursues. He's involved on a daily basis working to establish the design direction and works directly with client leadership on critical issues, ensuring a successful outcome and meaningful relationship. As the references protest, Marlon is accessible and involved. He's keen attention to detail and design, rigor, and ensure the success of every project evident in their acclaim, both as architect and educator. Ati brings over 25 years of experience to her role as principal at Marlon Blackwell Architects, where she also serves as director of interiors and sustainability. Her sensitivity as a designer and knowledge of materials and details enrich every project in the office, and she works closely with Marlon on and all project teams to deliver thoughtful designs that are both sensual and sensible. With that, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today, as well as Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So to start, I think it would be great to first understand a little bit about, the topic, right, about quality, the culture of quality and purpose. And maybe we can start there. I'd love to understand from both of you, what does that mean to you and how is that made actionable within the firm?
Sure. I think first and foremost, it has a lot to do with the work that we're doing ultimately in the firm, the types of projects that we take on, the level of attention that we give to those projects, I think, and then the sort of not only the conceptualization of it, but the process by which realization happens is something that is critical to every outcome that we have. So the qualitative, we're always trying to leverage in helping the people we're working with, both our team, design team, that includes the consultants, that includes the contractors, everyone, understand what the qualitative goals are, and of course, the clients as well. And those are manifested by aspirations, of course, but also by principles. It's certain core values and principles that we're operating from that allow us to direct circumstance instead of circumstance directing us in many ways. And so that also feeds into our purpose, which is really to make architecture that enriches the daily lives of the citizens that it serves, and as well to think Ati really can say this best in some ways about, maybe you want to talk about that, about that architecture can happen anywhere, the sort of thing that we're always underscoring.
Yeah, we talked about, how architecture should be for everyone, anywhere you practice and for any budget. So that's the core of our principle in a way. One of the reasons why we started to practice here, and we thought, we don't know if when we first started 20 something years ago, we would still be practicing here, but we were lucky that the place had supported us and in fact actually uplift us in a way that we couldn't even have imagined when we first started. We thought it would just be a side hustle for Marlon and I, while we have a real day job. One of the things that I find is that you have to continue to reinforce your idea of purpose and why you do what you do. And that just not only within yourself, because it's very easy to get carried away by, the flashiness of the practice to some extent, the kind of client or the people that are coming at you like at the same time, and also to get lost sometimes when the company grows from one or two of us to, larger and larger, is that you have to keep reminding yourself why you're doing what you're doing and what are the things that's important to you, and try to inject that, or at least let your team members understand, because you don't always have the same team members from day one. So they might come and go, but how that, the change of forces and people and associates still allow you to keep your original idea and purpose and keep on producing that for every project that you're working on. So it's So in a way that I think that's one of those things that you have to stay strong and to stay focused and have a sense of direction. Like Marlon was saying, like what is the circumstance, and try to direct that rather than allowing ourselves to be directed by a certain circumstance. So I'm always quite aware of the fact that like sometimes we would be doing a project for a client and, they would give us credit, and like the embassy work, for example, that's quite interesting to me where, you're designing based on a certain sets of criteria, like certain things has to be a certain way or adjacencies and blast structure and whatnot. But like when you get the credit back from the embassy people, they'll come back and they'll say, we can't do this because of that. But how do you retain your initial idea of the design and yet still make incredible changes, sometimes 100% change to what you proposed the first time, but how that can still, even though you're making a lot, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that don't be afraid of making changes, but yet at the same time, understand that you're not going to mess up your initial thinking or your initial idea or your design intent, because that's what you already have within you,
That's
like,
the qualifier.
Yeah.
That's the qualifier. If, we go through processes of VE, everybody has to go through that. We go through processes, of feedback, as Ati is saying, but we always feel like it's our professional duty to say, here's what we had agreed upon as we move forward in the process of the original intentions and aspirations and the qualities that we wanted to instill in this project. And, it's my responsibility to tell you that if we go any further with the VE, our primary material will be duct tape, to hold things together, and you're going to lose what you're after. So there's it's not necessarily drawing a line in the sand, but helping them understand where that line exists so that because if you lose, they lose. That's the reality, and they have to care as much as you do. So that's part of what we're doing there, and not being afraid of that. A lot of people dread it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. No, not really. You have a clear, centered understanding, and the team does, of what we're after here. Then if it's a good idea, if it's a good set of values that you've put forward, it can be realized at multiple price points. You just have to accept that. And so part of also what we're thinking about is how do we put purpose before profit? We're not interested in being martyrs for the profession by any means, where we like to be compensated for our creativity and for the ideas and for the execution of those ideas. But at the same time, we like to operate where we're led by purpose rather than just the sort of transaction of having a business.
This is a great start. Really love that introduction. There's a lot of people I imagine in the room that are practicing in a similar kind of regional setting where they're going against the grain, where some might, some of their colleagues maybe from school or where they previously worked, they looked at where they're headed and they thought, it's not possible there. It's not possible to do architecture there. I'm curious, how did that view become false at Marlon Blackwell Architect in this place in the country that's less well known for architecture? How come that was possible in your practice?
Sure. Ati, you mind if I take this on?
No, go ahead.
Right. Okay. We're in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We like to say we're in the middle of nowhere, but close to everywhere kind of thing. A geographical oddity, if there ever was one. But first of all, I was encouraged by, folks like Ife Jones, who had proved that you could have a national, even international, reputable known in a small place like Fayetteville. So it wasn't like we were going to be the first ones to make it happen. It was being done. It had been done. But could we stand on the shoulders of someone like Faye Jones without emulating Faye's work? Faye's work is Faye's work, right? Could we have our own voice? That was the question. And that was, having returned from Italy in grad school, I had been living in Boston, and I was teaching at Syracuse University, upstate New York, but I'm from the South, Alabama originally. I thought I want to be back to my roots, be back closer. Of course, where we're at, it's not really the South. I would say it's more the Ozarks, like being in Appalachia. But nonetheless, traditionally hard-scrabble place, traditionally relatively poor. Faye had proved that you could do really fantastic work. However, he hadn't had the opportunity to do a lot of outside of residences and churches, occasional office building, but not a lot of really diverse projects. And so it seemed like there was an opportunity there to with schools and libraries and other types of civic and institutional buildings that could be architecture of the highest order. We were encouraged by that. The other thing was encouraging is that out here in the middle, things happen relatively quickly in terms of getting executed and built. Just getting a permit sometimes can take a year or two in other urban locations. Here it was like a week. It's like we can get going. So there's an immediacy to that was really stimulating. So we're like, we can make this happen. But the other thing that we realized too is that in getting going, we had to actually, if not build it ourselves, we had to manage the construction to get subcontractor stuff because nobody wanted to build it. It was too weird or, couldn't afford it if they had it. So we got involved with construction as well. I don't think we were particularly good at it, but we did get things built. And of course, then as projects increased in complexity and scale, we stepped away from that to more traditional setups. But we were just like, we can do this. Now, teaching also had a big part of that as well. The opportunity to teach and practice what you preach, that was a motivating factor. So no matter where one teaches, I think that there's an opportunity there. So you can be, again, relatively in the middle of nowhere, but you have to find ways to practice what you preach. And I think students are pretty savvy. They'll tolerate a lot, but they don't tolerate too much professors who don't practice what they preach, I think. So it's how you build your creds. So I think that was part of it. It's like, yeah, we can do this. There's examples of this. And then as we got here, we discovered other examples all over the South and the Midwest and, O'Neill Ford and, a host of others, Chris Risher, there's, Sam Mockbee was, making great things happen at the time. So we can do this. If people are relatively in tune, the difference is perhaps, I don't know, there's a lot more pragmatism out here. But we just said, well, we're just going to talk about what our projects can do for you. What is that value proposition? How they perform, how they're used, how they make, fundamental civic dignity possible. And worry less about what it looks like or that sort of thing. And I think once we relaxed on that, we found that clients to relax on that too. They were getting what they need, and we were then providing more. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but it had been done, so it was not like.
And I think that it's possible for anyone. You pick your town or your city, I think that I would say the secret to getting your name out there is one, certainly is competition within your state, submitting that and learning how to, first of all, you have to do a good job on your project. You have to try your very hardest to do the best design you could bring on, within the limitation of every project, it's either cost or whatever it is. So do a good job, submit to competitions. And I think that one thing I can say for sure is over the years is the importance of relationship. You can't do it alone. You have to be out there, put yourself in a place where you ask others to mentor you, get close to people that you admire, reach out to them, come visit their office, or just write to them and say, hey, I really like your work. Will you mind if I come visit? Like having that level of mentorship is always really good. Because guess what? In my mind, like all the things that we have gotten, like all the maybe, a fellowship at the American Academy in Rome, or all of that is all based on someone's putting your name in that hat. And in order for someone to have that level of admiration for your work, is because they got to know you as a person. They got to know you from the product that you put out there. So that's through competition. And from competition, there will be publication, so if you win your local state award, then you start to feel like, hey, maybe my project is pretty good. Let me submit to the regional one. And then you submit to the national. And once you win the national, you'll be in a magazine. So that's how you get there. And if you win a few of those, people start to, hey, did you see that project by so-and-so? I've never heard of them. They start researching you. And then if you know people, they start putting your name in a hat. And that's how we got around. And that's what we do too nowadays. Like we're pretty much on every organization there is, the Cooper Hewitt, the National Design Award, the Art and Letters, the Ford Foundation, USA Artists. Every year we get invitation to submit people that either they're artists or designers or anything. I think that's one of the things. I'm an introverted person more than as an extroverted. So, always been hanging out with him. But I feel like all the things that I learned was the fact that the one most important thing is your relationship with others and keeping that, be nice to people. The fact that you're nice to people and you write back to them like maybe 20 years down the road and always with a sense of gratefulness, I feel like that always get you ahead in a way that will people have the conflict. Because you might be like the best designers, but if you're such a jerk, like people will be like, I'm not going to submit their name in there because I don't know if people do that, but maybe they do. But I'm just saying that, just try to be nice. You don't have to be extra nice, but just don't be a jerk. That's all.
I love how in the weeds this has gotten, which is amazing because we don't even on the market, even on this kind of what we're tapping into right now, which is almost like how do you market and position the firm, or like what I feel you've described as a very almost, I won't say tried and true because obviously it's like it's disproportionate and like not, it's still a small group of people that have the stature that you've been able to achieve. But I think the pattern, the kind of that pattern of being part of academia and leveraging academia for a lot of its like existing networks that then are also part of these other institutional networks, I think is something that, unless you're almost like a student of that, it's like hard for some people to know even where to start with that. But I feel there's been maybe an intention around that, something you've been able to pick up on and maybe learn from mentors, which I'd love to learn more about.
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Yeah, I think, I had a chance for about a year to teach with Peter Eisman, which was a real, they thought wouldn't it be interesting to put the neo-Luddite with this, theory thinker dude. We got on pretty great. But I always remember what he would tell students. He says, whatever you learn here, before you leave, if you know enough to know that you don't know, then I think you'll do pretty well once you get out of here. And, you always got to remind yourself to know enough to know that you don't know. And so I sort of adopted that in many ways, which is a way to humble yourself a little bit and be inclusive of other people's thoughts and opinions and advice. So I did, as Ati was saying, we sought out mentors, even people I didn't know. I remember when I first came here, they put me in charge of the lecture series. I said, oh, great. So I invited Herzog and Demiron at the time, Peter Zumthor and Robert Irwin. And they all came. And they, not necessarily superstars at the time, but it came, hung out, and spent 3 or 4 days with these guys. You're going to learn something, And I was like, they're doing interesting work. They're thinking interestingly. And in particular, Peter was, lives in Haldenstein in the middle of nowhere in Switzerland, and, he was, how do you make great work? And it was the intensity and the commitment to developing work at every scale. Every project had to be solved at every scale of the hand, the scale of the building, the scale of the site. There's just this incredible commitment to and fidelity to thought and craft. And, that's a form of mentoring, right? I'm like, wow. And then I had people like Faye Jones around, but also great professors, my colleagues that I taught with, or my colleagues in the profession who had that practice I hoped for, that it seemed to be able to be making a go of it. How do you do that? And it is back to what Ati said, is developing the relationships. I grew up in an Air Force family, so I moved around a lot, learned how to be very active and how to pivot, but I never knew what it was to be a citizen. What is it to live in one place and be part of a community? We've been here now 30 years. And one of the reasons we stayed was because I was reminded that most architects that ever truly developed their fullest capacity are those that choose to stay in one place and really get below the surface of things, get to the underbelly, really discover what's there and develop those relationships, not only with the place, but with the people in the place. And so that's what we've been doing too. And that goes back to, Colin Whitehead, the author of the Underground Railroad, I think won the National Book Award about 4 or 5 years ago. They asked him, his principles to operate by in, these kind of trying times. And he said 3 things that really stuck with me. He said, first most, be kind to everyone. Whether you agree or not, be kind to everyone. 2, make your art, do your thing, at the highest level. And 3 is fight the power. And I think, what he meant by that was don't just fall in line, fight for what you believe is right, and what you believe is true. That's what we've been doing. And I think that's something you can travel with too, to find your place. And as part of those principles we're talking about. I think the other part about this in terms of a practice is I asked Faye Jones and I asked Lynn Mert this as well, essentially the same question. How is it that you could maintain such a consistent body of work over 50 to 60 years? That's really difficult. And they both answered the question differently. But essentially what they said is that we decided to start the firm the way we wanted to end it. So you don't just wake up at 50 and decide, I'm going to do good work. You have to really commit yourself early on to that. And they also said, we don't have any bread and butter. Every project, where there's the smallest thing or the largest thing, is important and gets our full attention. And that's how we've operated. So whether we're doing a carport, we've done a carport, or an embassy, several of those that we're currently working on, same level of attention, the same passion, the same battles, the same fight for making the project the best that it can be within the means that we're working with.
When you're working with your team very closely at this commitment, and I really want to bring back this word that you pointed out at the beginning about realization, what does that look like in the dialogue with the project team? Say maybe there's an example, because you've already shared some great examples, like great questions that you've asked others. So I'd love to hear, what is it, if you could put us through what that conversation might be like when it's like the moment of truth, when you decide we are going to commit to that realization that differentiates the work of Marlon Blackwell Architects.
You mean the moment of truth in the design process?
Yeah, especially around this point about realization.
Executing the project.
Yeah. Especially around the conversations you have with your team.
Yeah.
Like the project architects on the team or the designers on the team.
Ati, do you want to take that on? I can't really.
Yeah, I think one is to not be afraid, because I think people think when they look at a completed project, it could be a house or a large complex project like an embassy in Africa. They're all difficult in its own way. Like, you think that when you're in the deep of things, like oh my God, this is like the biggest challenge. I don't think I can do this. You just have to stay focused, because that's just part of life, because at any moment in time, any project has the potential to be, one, unbuilt, two, built in a crappy way where you give up somewhere along the way. Oh man, I can't overcome this. I just do whatever the heck they want, and we'll not show this in my portfolio. We've never done that. I've been in the office for so long. We either will say, okay, we will, disengage ourselves from the process. You can go ahead and do whatever. So that's one of those things that we always constantly have in any form, be able to stay true to who we are by making sure that our team understand that the challenges that you face every day at every juncture of a project is what make you strong and make the project end up well. So I think the whole idea of realization is to dodge the bullet, to figure out how to keep going. It's always one step at a time. It's not like you're working alone in isolation, doing a little painting, you're working with your client, your contractor, your consultant, everything else.
Design team.
Yeah, design team, your own team, so you have to have people that really understand the challenges and are ready to take on. They don't have to be everything. They can just be one thing. So you may be your project lead that are fearless and will handle the stresses that comes every day, and making sure that their team members, maybe the junior ones, understand that it's okay. It's one day at a time. We'll figure out one thing today, but if you allow all the difficult, and it's always going to be difficult. I don't care what people say. It's always going to be difficult. Like right now, people look at our office and think, how do you guys do that? All I can say, it was very difficult, especially early on. And it's still difficult now. But I think, once you understand that you can handle it, you make sure that, your team understand that and they can handle it. And I think maybe even you also attract the right team members. If it's self-selecting, I think what I find in the last 20 years is that people that maybe are maybe not so sure about the intensity of the work, or like maybe they're just more comfortable in more linear process or whatever, then they'll be like, I don't think this is my thing. I prefer to work on one big house by myself with my boss all the time. I'm going to leave and go back to that or whatever. And you have to respect that. But I think, just to make sure that you help them understand what the challenges are, to make them understand that in the end, it's not on your shoulder, it's on our shoulder, really fundamentally, but we're all in it together. So it's not, if it fails, it's not just that one, let's just say it's not just the project architects that fail, it's we're all shouldering all that pressure together, and we can all, handle it. And I think that has been, I feel like, what have kept us going. I have to credit all the people that had been working with us in the past. Either they're still here now or have gone, or our current people that are working now. Everyone handled the workload and the challenges that comes every day, and staying true to the whole concept of who we as a company.
Yeah, I think realization is tied to mindset, and actually we're now higher for mindset. I look at mindset, we look at mindset probably as much, if not more, than talent or experience. It really is about a kind of positive mindset and a kind of resiliency, a willingness to deal with complexity and difficulty, but also a willingness to be vulnerable to some degree. And that goes a long ways in terms of realizing a project, because you just got to keep coming back at it, and we're like smiling pit bulls on a stick. We're just going to keep going after it, man. Don't give up.
I'm curious, just even thinking about, I always like to, for better or for worse, my mind structures organizations a lot, almost like math equations. And one instance of it's like the commitment to a very, let's say, non-bread and butter work, very custom. Every project is a very specific solution, all the way down to materiality, means that you have a problem space that is very broad, right? And that you're constantly trying to chip away at, which adds a lot of variability. It adds a lot of additional complexity, and which sometimes can be handled at varying degrees of efficiency. And so what I'm very curious about is like, how do you is there something unique to the design process that you've developed over time, such that whether from the onset of a project, you're able to start to narrow that problem space, whether it's like through cost, budget, materiality is always a kind of probably a really big factor in that, in a way where it's not so much that you have, I think of, you mentioned Herzog and Demiron as maybe one of those sources of inspiration, Peter Zumthor, who are very much in your work is also very much predicated on the materiality to as much as the space. But I'm wondering if you have at least a process in place that starts to define, like, where you at least have rules of thumb in place or things like that your team can adopt in order to help them too. Because if every project is we're just going to start from scratch, then that leads to its own challenges.
So there are a couple things that have been going on. There are the projects of practice, that support the practice and the projects we work on, as varied as they may be, but they're all part of a meta project in the office. Okay. So that is, very much devoted to, say, material logics, how we use materials as a way of feeling the building, of the spaces, but also understanding them. So they're felt and they're understood. So there is a way to read the project through the material. It's almost like a code. So material logics that help facilitate the formal logics, or complement the formal logics. That's understood in every project. That's core. We've been working on a vocabulary, not a style, but a way of speaking that privileges elements as something worthy of design, not mere designation. And by designation, the art of picking things out of catalogs and things, which we do both. We even hybridize. We'll take designating systems and then hybridize them to create a higher degree of abstraction or something. So we're not afraid of that. But I think that's that vocabulary, in other words, trying to master in some form the language of your discipline, to find your voice through something we're really committed to in all the different projects. So the teams understand that, and they do have archives of resources they can go to, but we never fully replicate it. We may, from a thermal standpoint or some kind of technical standpoint, it may be something we iterate, but in terms of the actual artifact or thing itself or space, the spaces are never really like, but the things itself, that tends to be particular or to be a combination of particulars that we have to find, that have to coalesce around the kind of central intent and ideas. And if they don't coalesce, then they're eliminated. And then we continue to work on that. So that's a high degree of polishing, something that starts off rather rough, even as a crude sketch with a 9B pencil, that is constantly polished and, brought back, and smoothed until the form or the really truly emerges in its fullest potential. So I think people tend to get that it's an iterative process. We don't just hand out one solution to a client, nor to us. We always do. We curate at least 3 or 4 that we're looking at it broadly with a wide angle lens so that the clients can really participate in the process as well. And the 3 or 4 that we'll put out there, if they pick any one of them, we're agnostic. Oh, fantastic. We can make architecture. And then they always ask the question, well, they put a gun to your head, or probably not the best metaphor, but if I put you to the task, what do you prefer? So this one, they're all good. And in the end, 9 times out of 10, they go with the one we kind of like because they want to rest assured that they're making a good decision too. So that's also part of the process. That's less academic or intellectual, but it's also about how you get things done, be persuasive.
Yeah, I might add to that we try to understand the place, something familiar about the place, and then where we take that as sort of inspiration to create something that we call strangely familiar. So I feel like our work has this twist of strangeness to it, and that's just on purpose. So in a way that if you're looking at a barn, like you feel like something familiar about the barn, but also something weird. So that whole strangeness, recreation of that strangeness is a thing that we try to pursue, because I feel like it's understanding the place and distilling the essence of that place, not in a cutesy way, but with a way that you can twist it to make it an architectural proposition in a way it's strangely familiar. We use
that is such a great, when you describe that strangely familiar, it just reminds me so much of, and I'm curious if this is basically a little bit of what you're also getting at, which is, when you're leading teams, repetition is you end up becoming more of a router of information and very repetitive because people get lost in the details. And so it's very hard for them to realize, hey, the main goal is the purpose of the firm, right? Everything should always come back to what is the purpose of the firm. And one level deeper, sometimes in like creative direction, there's these shorthands that people might develop, or like a list of like sort of principles. And this kind of strangely familiar could be said to be a way in which the team has a very clear creative direction, in the sense that it's not explicit on saying, hey, we're going to use X material, but it's saying like at the end of the day, when we gather around the model in whatever form, or gather around the design, this question of like, where's the strangely familiar part of this project should be part of it. And I feel like it's not something that's explicit, right? This is one of those things you don't learn in school necessarily, but it is a very helpful way to organize creative direction for any firm. And recently, as a context, like I've been seeing this pop up in publications more so. I think I was looking at Work AC's publication of recent projects, and they have a page dedicated to like the rules of thumb, like 3 rules that they have for projects. And OMA's recent book on search that they released has a whole page dedicated to 10 rules for OMA projects and a checklist, but it's not like, it's very abstract still, but still very helpful to guide a team to stay on track with the principles of the office.
Yeah, we don't have that. I'll put it this way. We have it, but we haven't formalized it. But it's funny you brought it up because in a recent, I can't remember if it was a senior associate meeting or a team meeting, but there was some talk of that could be a helpful thing. Our former studio director, John Bolkins, wrote an essay called Present Tense, Future Perfect, which is a type of mini manifesto for the firm. It's in the new monograph. It's going to be out here in a couple of weeks. And I think, it covers an array of issues, everything from drawing to materials to how we think about architecture that can act as a guide. In fact, I gave that to everyone in the firm. It's also in a small book that Design Intelligence put out called 10 Under 10. It was when we were under 10 that we were qualified. But that was our contribution, was that essay. And then, gave, like I say, everyone in the firm that. We haven't got it down to the sort of cryptic level yet. Material logics would be a part of that, or some of these other things about the particulars of place, being great observers, careful observers of, the cultural, the geological, and the biological aspects of place, I think are critical. I mean, Frank Harmon, a great architect, good friend, and a very good writer, he references Strunk and White's, the fundamentals to writing. And one of the things that they observe is all the best writers are very focused on the particulars. The best writing, it's the particulars, which is interesting, not the title or the subject matter per se, it's the particulars of how an essay or a writing is crafted, that it's really what sticks with folks. And so we're very interested in the particulars of a place, whether it's, again, something that's tied to its history or to the social fabric, the built fabric, that sort of the vernacular, that sort of thing. We're always, looking for that hook, or as Ati was getting at, that moment where we can make a connection, but it's more of a tension between the particular of that place, but always tied to our understanding of the more universal language of the discipline. And so it's at once local and global, part of that discussion of both. And that's a mission, that's a goal. If it looks, I never forget having a design review with Mary Miss. We were working on the Indianapolis 100-acre art park, the Ruth Lilly Pavilion, and there were other projects we were working on. But my first pass at the Ruth Lilly Pavilion was this glass box in the woods, and I was so excited about it. And she looked at it and says, "Wow," because I think that's already been done before. She was like the Farnsworth out. I was like, it's so derivative that, it has no attachment except to anything but the precedent, And so she kicked me in the pants nicely right there, and challenged me. Says, think about the things you've been doing. And how would you reinterpret that? And, that's where the Ruth Lilly thing came out of, was a kind of a Miesian sort of precept, but being challenged by an artist and the landscape architect at Blake we were working with, to, hey, raise your game, man. You're too close to the source. And so that's what I mean. There wasn't enough tension between the reference and between the place. And that's something that people need to grasp. That's why they go ahead.
I think the key word is tension.
Yeah.
Productive tension. Yeah, productive tension. I think, if you look at a lot of our current work, I would say in the last, 10 years, maybe even going forward, is that there's always that weird tension there that makes it a little bit more aggressive in a way over something that might be just plain chicken house structure, so that a little twist there someplace, that tension, either maybe a flip in the roof or a little compression within thinking about the logic of material assembly, for example. So a lot of time it's just a gestural thinking. Like, I think when you're starting a project, you come up with a sketch. Like, somehow there was something about that early first few sketches that sort of you get hung up on. And how do you create something like that and bring it through? And that's what we tend to focus on when we start a project. It might be a gestural thing about feeling like you want to recreate this feeling of dwelling in a cave or something like that, or being inspired by a chicken house. But how do you transform that so it didn't end up looking like a chicken house? That's where you begin, but not, like Marlon would say, not where you would end. So.
And I want the conversation to run off into aesthetics and everything, because that's an aspect of it. But I think back to the purpose part of it, the impact is part of the mission. I think part of the mission of any firm. Most people's benchmark for reality is based on what they're surrounded. That's how they understand what is real. You know, if we want to elevate and want to expand people's reality to get them to ask the question, how might it be otherwise? Or, you know, change their expectations, then we should be offering alternative models for particular building types or particular responses urbanistically or, you know, environmentally, you know, socially, whatever that may be, to interrupt the habitual way in which they see things, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing too in these crossroads communities or small towns or whatever, when we have the opportunity to make something, you know, is to be incredibly respectful of where we're at, not just to, you know, let's see what would happen if a UFO landed here, if we could put our name on it. You know, that's not how we're thinking about. How can this really make your community stronger, better? How do we strengthen the institution of the library in this town of 2,500 people and take what they already have and then begin to enrich it through an intervention or whatever? So the point being is that if we can expand that, you really open up a lot of conversation that you can have, and you change what the next architect or designer, that conversation they can participate in, and that they're set up to do something even greater, perhaps. And so you can see real progress and real evolution of a place that doesn't just become fixed in time, but actually becomes part of the evolution of cities in time by introducing new works. And so the new gets demystified a little bit because it's actually useful, right? It's a marriage of making commentary and then being useful. Really, I think makes impactful work. We all want to make commentary with our work, but we also have to demonstrate how that commentary is useful.
We have plenty of questions from the audience in our time left.
And did we get enough into organization? You know how we're organized. Did you want to talk about that, or do you want me to talk about it?
Maybe in the questions.
Yeah. So one great way to move into this is, I'm so curious, and I think a lot of people in the audience are too, and especially to this question here. What have you learned as a practice over the year to make it possible to practice in this way, to go into this commitment with the client? How have you structured, maybe more specifically, the project as an organized work together with the client, such that it is possible to go through this deeper investigation with the client on the project to achieve that quality that is maybe different from other architects who aren't so committed to that? I'm curious how you structure. What have you learned in terms of what's successful to structure these projects, schedules, budgets, how you like structure that more granular, those details about making it possible?
Sure, take that on.
I'll just say very shortly, I think that the smartest way is like you get the client to think that they came up with all the solution and the design when they're actually just supporting what you were giving them. And I think that's a two-way street, because you listen to them and then you listen to their concern and address it in a way from their point of view, but at the same time, giving the resolution or solution that will be coming from yourself. So once you get your client to partner with you, they start to buy into the idea because they think it's coming from them. Because a lot of time the client think that they only know what they know from what they can see, but they don't understand that when they commission you, they're actually asking you to do the design for them, but you're also doing the design in collaboration with them, their ideas, their thinking, their thoughts, their budget, their material, all of those things. So I think the smartest, and I think that's one of those things that I keep on learning, is that not to be afraid of their fear, like maybe budget, maybe, constraining a tilted facade, how you clean that, how you replace windows, this kind of stuff, like how you take something like that and actually flip the conversation where allow them to say, oh, I could actually clean the window this way. Oh, I can change the glass from the inside or whatever it is, like, so that you address all their concern, but you also at the same time make them to believe like they were a large part of that design. Yeah. So once they bought into it, they're all in. Sometimes people ask us all the time, how do you guys get all these clients? You must have had just great client coming for you guys. No, we just got just like everyone else. But it's understanding how to make them believe.
What's that saying? We say that there are no bad projects. There's only bad clients. So every project's great, but you you have to vet your clients and qualify your clients and who you want to work with. And, if it's not a fit, I always try to reference other folks for them and help them out, but kissing them out the door, it's just not going to work. It's better to get people you really want to work with. But getting that process to work, I think a couple of things that we do, we really spend a lot of time with them through the design process. Every level, we really compartmentalize what the issues are. We get out agendas. We're very focused on, not letting the conversation get away from us, and we try to control the conversation, and we listen carefully, as Ati said, and with that we can act boldly. So if we've listened carefully, then there's a lot of things you can do if you're hitting their concerns. And so we constantly have to keep iterating and showing the development. So they're part of the development of the project. They're not spectators. We're always looking for their feedback and their buy-in, so that by the time we get to, things like the end of schematic design or the end of design development, we are all on the same page. We're all in this. We have been building something that, of high quality. This can be a great place for their folks to work or for people to come. Will also, be resilient and durable over time. We're addressing the maintenance, things like that. Nobody wants deferred maintenance if they can. All of the material aspects of things, all of that as we're bringing them along. Once we get into the VE, we're there. We're hand in hand with them. We're not afraid. We're not throwing fits or pouting or anything. We're working through it because we're all committed to this. We want to get there. And if it means, we have literally redesigned a project before just so we could get it to where they could, because there was no other way. But that's very rare. And then
Marlon, make it quick because there's lots of questions.
Oh, is it really? Okay. Then construction is the key. The construction phase is the key. We are all in on construction. We're there a lot. There's lots of mock-ups. There's, constant, when there's a problem in the field, we work with the contractor. We don't kick them in the ass, with stuff. We say, okay, this is how we're going to solve this, and if we have to do a little compromise, but it gets us there where we go, it'll always be something that we can live with and we move forward. So it's a very proactive process with the client, and they know that we are a true partner with them, and we're very responsive. And the last thing I'm going to say is we're not, if you put purpose for profit, we're not nickel diming and being transactional with the clients. The transaction is the project. And again, we're not going to be a martyr for anybody. We're going to get paid. But at the same time, I'm not going to nickel dime, folks. And that it goes a long way for relationships. Sorry, other questions.
We've got one here. How do you approach new project types that you have no previous experience in? How do you prepare your team for that as well? That's
research. We're looking the research on the type itself, which is non-architectural almost. And then, that history, and then research through precedents, through exemplars, trying to understand some of the strategies that are out there, and like I say, I'm going to take it back before we know enough to know that we don't know. It's all architecture. And our motto is, if we've done it once, we're experts. We're designers, and it's just more design. So yeah, we've sat across the table and had, certain clients or reps of clients say, hey, we really don't want you. You haven't done this a bunch. This is your first time. Yeah, and that's why it'll be better. And our first major project was, we had never done a golf clubhouse before. They'd fired the leading national expert on that because they kept getting the same thing. Bring us in, completely different. So we're unafraid. We know we can make a difference in that typology.
Got plenty here. It's hard to choose. I see someone who raised their hand. I thought we don't normally do this, but I thought I might invite Lorcan to just ask your question live. I'd love to.
Lorcan O'Hearley?
Oh, indeed.
You gotta know him.
Hello, my friend.
Oh, no, this is the teacher going to spank the student.
My friend, how are you?
We're doing. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just really, if you don't, hopefully you can hear me, but I just love this fireside chat. It's wonderful to listen to your inspirations. One thing that's always fascinated me about your work is that your fearlessness. You take on projects, budgets and constraints and parameters as assets. You see this is going to benefit the project. That's really an interesting discussion for people to understand that. In a sense, one doesn't see them as constraints, but assets, opportunities. And that's what's really fascinating to me about your work. And the other comment is that I love that quote you mentioned early on about you want to end your practice how you start it. That's fascinating too, because from the early years of your work, there's always been this DNA. You've had collectively a great eye, which I think is so difficult for architects to have a good eye. So all these parameters, I think because you have instinctive and intuition and a great eye, you seem to take on projects of different scale, scope, challenges, and be able to know that you can bring it to a project which is underpinned by a great idea. So perhaps some thoughts about that. Again, as I said, it's an amazing body of work that you guys have done. And anyway, that was just something that always comes to the forefront for me, how you seem to embrace projects and be able to find the essence. And distilling, the term you were using earlier, Ati, is decided distilling the essence of a project. So
sure. I think we're very content with small victories sometimes. We got that corner, really nice stair. How about that handrail? And because I used to work in projects, and Ati was the same in firms that we not necessarily want to work for. They didn't always get the best projects, but we took a lot of pride and we get a little something. Sometimes, one thing we realized in small projects like what Lorcan's talking about, the constraint, you get 2 or 3 moves. That's it. You do it really well. This will be a successful project. And then the thing that we didn't talk about, but we always bring up, Ati and I, is that think about the things that don't cost any money. Proportionate scale. If you can just get it proportionally correct, if you can just get the lights to line up in the right place and be composed in the room correctly, sometimes that's all you can do. And that can make a big difference and can demonstrate how design can be impactful and even make change. So that's how we look at it. Okay, we don't lower our expectations or the discourse. We just say, hey, what can we do within these constraints? And we're going to have to do that as a profession if architecture is indeed for everyone, except rather than just for a few. And that's been, I think, a lot of the debate and discourse right now is who is architecture for? And we can talk about it, but then how do we actually demonstrate that it is for everyone and it can be accessed by everyone? And that means taking on projects at times that some people would never dream of taking on because you're not going to make any real money at it. But that's where purpose comes from. Purpose goes over profit. So I break even. What's the harm in breaking even on a project sometimes? On other projects, I do really well, and I'm not painting a Rolf business model. It's a way to make the difference that I think you want to make. And that's why we're doing these larger projects, healthcare, hospitality and stuff. Those are relatively new for us, but we haven't lost. We're doing a Yopon tea processing plant in Clarksdale, Mississippi. We're working on a small housing initiative where we can 3D print some affordable housing. Little things, little tiny library in a little community in Bismarck, Arkansas. Those are just as important. And I don't think firms should lose their connection to those places when they start to succeed at a certain scale and level. I don't know if that answers Lorcan, but
it does. Again, forgive me.
It helps.
I'll stop talking in a moment,
but
I do love that
question.
No, I love what you're saying, because I think for architects, it's so important to really look at opportunities and see architecture for everybody. And you need to really embrace all the challenges, constraints, and see them as assets that you can make great architecture. One does have to refine one's eye to be able to make those decisions that one makes and make the right decisions, you say, 2 or 3. So I see that throughout your work. And I think that's the brilliance of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think to add to this conversation, I think now today more than ever, when you mentioned like breaking even on a project, I think it's very possible to not see it as break even if one were to embrace the culture that we're in, which is very image oriented, or in other words, like it's actually more of an investment in my mind, my perspective.
I think you said it right. Yeah, that's really what it is. It's only a break even on the books, but the value that you've given and the value that's returned, the little church we did in Springdale, Arkansas, is the gift that keeps on giving. And I was just there this morning. We're helping them with put in a new security system that, they could, and trying to help contribute to that. This is years after we've done it. People come up to you and, in a restaurant and say, I love my church. Thank you. That's payment. That's a form of payment.
Yeah. No, even, one thing we talk here about Monograph is like, for better or for worse, way in which to be able to generate new work now is very mediated through, it's just like before architects relied on such very few mediums to become well known or to establish themselves, even regionally. It was like the local newspaper, maybe. Now you have things like Instagram where it's just like you can build audiences that are substantial with just positioning the way you look at the design process a little bit differently as more like content creation on top of what you're doing and the objectives of what you're doing. That small project can actually have outsized impact just because the love and attention that was put onto it can be noticeable and seen by such a broader audience with relatively low effort, which is what's crazy about today.
Yeah.
So I think we're over time. I really appreciate that conversation from Lorcan, that input, but we do have one last question we'd like to ask everybody that brings it back to, I think, people, which I think you'll both indulge me in. And that is, what is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for you? And so we get all sorts of answers on this question, from personal to business. The stage is yours. And maybe, Ati, maybe we can start with you.
The nicest thing, I'll put it in the context of our business. I think the nicest thing was that in the early years when we were starting, there was just Marlon and myself, and then the first employees and the second one and whatnot. I just felt like the early crew that were with us were so incredible in such a way because they helped give their all. And a lot of them are just young graduates from the University of Arkansas. They didn't know any better, just like we were. We just love what we do. We give everything that we had. We work all the time. But there was never that much of a conversation about compensation or succession or any of that stuff at the time, because that was just about our love of what we do and the sense of purpose that we all get and the self-worth that we got back collectively together by working, building something. Like at the time, we didn't know we were building anything. We thought it was just a job that we all working and enjoying. And so it's become, the more when I look back, and those work now becomes the beginning of who we are to get the next one, and basically the foundation of the work that we are doing today. And I think those early years and the early people that were here, and they all know who they are, were the nicest thing, because it was like free of any other expectation, with the exception of just happy to do the work, even though it was very difficult. It was many years of struggles, but we don't even remember those struggles. We just remember all the good things and all the end product that we had. All the little project that we finished then becomes, the project that we're doing today. So that's my answer.
Such a good answer. I don't know. I have had so many wonderful things and gifts from people. I'm always forever grateful, especially for the relationships, the support I have, colleagues and friends on a day-to-day basis. There is a kind of community around that I deeply, deeply appreciate. I'm going to take it back to something business, because in practice, if that's okay, I want to be consistent a little bit with doing. I think when we got our first major project, where Ati and I, and like I say, a couple others, and we're down in a basement studio in the corner of the town square, and we've just gotten the biggest project of our lives. And we thought nobody knew about this project. It was, again, a new golf clubhouse and practice facility for the university golf team and all of this. And we're sitting there with 3 or 4 people. How are we going to do this? And then across the street, the president of the local bank comes over and walks down. And he says, I heard you won a project. And we're like, how would you know that? And he goes, I know a lot. And he says, you're going to have to meet payroll. And he said, you're not always going to get paid on time. You're going to have to staff up, and you're going to have to really grow up as a business. And I said, yes. He said, you're going to need cash. And he put his arm around me and said, let's go across the street. And he gave us nearly $500,000 credit line to help us go through in those difficult times. No one asked him to do it. Oh. But he believed in the community and what we were doing and what we're trying. And that was incredible, because didn't ask for it, but it made the difference for us to survive for, many times where, it was really tough times. So, yeah. And so keep your credit good and things happen great. But that was, I'm just taking that back to it. There's tons of good things, but that made a huge difference because we could grow. We could actually take that off the plate and focus on the work.
Yeah, that's amazing. You won't get that from Bank of America, I don't think, but that's
No,
it's important to develop a relationship with your local regional banks. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's great. Now I can just call them for anything. Hey, can you write me a cashier's check? And I just go pick it up. Like, you don't have, how do you do that in Bank of America?
Really appreciate both of your times. Everyone that's still listening with us and that joined us for this amazing conversation with you both. I've learned a ton. I'm super inspired and energized by what we talked about today, especially around, I think Lorcan talked a little bit about it, but just like the maintaining that taste and that creative direction so strong and being fearless about that too. In the face of a lot of doubt from people, everyone that you're talking to sometimes, every stakeholder might have their own sets of fears that you're also trying to overcome. I hope that everyone got a lot out of this conversation. I know I did. I'm sure Chris did as well. And thank you so much for your time and for being vulnerable and open to share these with us. My daughter in the background also appreciated it. We
thank everyone that participated today, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of our thinking about things and our experiences. And, it's been a great ride so far.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And thank you to the audience that actually stuck around.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Be well, everyone. And,
take care.
We'll hope to see you around. Okay. Cheers.
Thank you all. And there's lots of comments coming in. Thank you to everybody. Thank you, Marlon and Ati and the rest of the audience. Great conversation. Very inspiring. I think a lot of designers, architects, principals in the audience are going to leave this feeling with a new sense of energy and fearlessness. So thank you for instilling that with the group today.
You bet. Our pleasure. Thank you so much. It's an honor. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.